Good morning. Welcome to Capacity Europe 2022. My name's Liz Boot-Hanford. I'm the Head of Content for Capacity Media, Broad Group and ITW, and it's my pleasure to see you all here this morning. I'd like to thank all of our sponsors for their support of this year's event, including our host sponsor Colt, our diamond sponsors Deutsche Telekom, Sparkle, STC and Vodafone, our platinum sponsors China Unicom, Console Connect PCCW Global, and Exit Infrastructure. Thank you also to all of our gold, silver and bronze sponsors, as well as our exhibitors. Please give them all a big round of applause for their support of this year's event. As a quick reminder, I'm sure you've seen signage around the rooms for SwapCard. That's where you can find all of the information about the attendee list, the speakers, the agenda, and all of our sponsors as well. This morning, we're going to enjoy a session on the metaverse, a keynote panel on architecting the network infrastructure, and a presentation on keeping Ukrainian internet running. But before that, it's my pleasure to introduce our 2022 keynote, Xavier Labau from the European Space Agency, who will be addressing how digital transformation is being enabled from space. So please give him a big warm round of applause and welcome him to the stage.
Thank you very much for the kind introduction. I'm delighted to be here in front of this audience. I'm the space guy, and my name is Xavier Labau, as introduced, and I work for the European Space Agency. And I'm going to try to illustrate what the role of satellites and space is in the digital transformation. So I would like to invite you to join me in a little trip. We are walking on the moon. And you see there some settlements, and you see there the gateway, that is a permanent space station that will be orbiting around the moon. And you see a couple of satellites that will be providing communication and navigation services. So if we can play the video, please. This is me walking on the moon, and in my visor I have augmented reality where I'm playing a video.
We're going back to the moon. For the first time in more than half a century, humans will walk on the moon again. But this time, we'll feel closer. In the decades since we've been away, the giant leaps have happened here. The people on our planet have learned to thrive in a digital world, a connected world. The people who next walk on the moon will now be able to enjoy this same connectivity because of ESA's Moonlight Initiative. A lunar constellation of satellites and base stations providing seamless connectivity back to Earth, allowing new possibilities for discovery. To communicate. To navigate. And to explore our place in the universe more deeply than ever before. With more countries than ever set to embark on their own lunar programs, Moonlight will support a permanent lunar space station that will orbit the moon. A gateway to these further journeys, so instead of going back, we can go forward to the moon, together, and this time, to stay. Moonlight will help us safely touch down on the surface and touch base with our colleagues and loved ones once we're there, keeping us constantly connected with home as we venture further and further away from it, pushing the boundaries of science and exploration beyond our planet, beyond the moon and Mars, and beyond our imaginations.
Perfect. So this is not a Hollywood production, and it's not science fiction either. We have an initiative called Moonlight that is aimed at developing this infrastructure around the moon and on the moon so that future missions, not just ESA, NASA, many nations are planning to send missions, robotic and human missions to the moon, and even the private sector. So there is a developing economy, we believe, on the moon. And with this initiative, what we want is to simplify the future missions going to the moon so that they focus on what they are aimed at doing, be that exploration or exploitation of the moon resources, and the telecommunications is something that is standardized and for which there is a network. So very much in line with what all of us are doing here in this conference. So now I'm in control. Let me make a little step backwards and tell you, for those of you that are not familiar, who are we at the European Space Agency? The European Space Agency is an intergovernmental organization that is formed by 22 member states, and we have 4 associate member states. We have existed since 1975 and developed many, many space missions. And of course, I mean, we are there to develop space and its applications. We basically have a budget per year of around 6.5 billion euros, which is a small amount if you look into the size of the population in Europe or worldwide. I mean, 12 euros per European. I'm here to talk about telecommunications. This is my field of expertise, and obviously I would be praying to the converted if I would say that there is a transformation, a revolution ongoing with the digitalization of businesses and society. So connectivity is fundamental for that, obviously, as all of us know here. And we have taken the stance of using 5G and 6G, or betting on 5G and 6G as the instrument of developing the connectivity that is required for this digital transformation. And in that, we believe that satellites are critical in order to deliver the promises of connectivity into a digitalized business environment in particular, in order to provide a global, truly global coverage everywhere. Just a couple of figures there. I mean, I think the first figure is very well known among this community. Analysts say that the impact into the economy of 5G and 6G can be around $13 trillion, out of which space is a very small fraction. I mean, just 530 billion. But for a community like the space community, this is huge. It's a big step forward. And that's why we have decided to very strongly put efforts into the role of satellites into 5G and 6G. And we created a strategic program line for that. And in particular, we are focusing on what is key. That is, satellites help into the connectivity to provide seamless availability of this connectivity solution. Ubiquitous should be the same, but also increasing the resilience of terrestrial networks and submarine cables. We are focused in ESA in driving innovation. We are an innovation agency. And we have a number of areas. We are busy on developing technology, developing equipment, developing all kinds of, solutions, and working in the downstream sectors, the business sectors, so that the integration of satellite with terrestrial 5G and 6G provides solutions to the challenges that exist in those areas. And this is both in the area of mobility, be that autonomous vehicles, maritime, air, or land, but also in the industrial IoT, and Industry 4.0. This is just an example that I always like to use to illustrate. I mean, this is a digital mine. A digital mine that is mainly operated by robots. And it is controlled through digital twins and remotely through a headquarters, a control center somewhere. And there, I mean, you have all kind of, say, needs and use cases. From the environmental assessment perspective, from the vehicle's performance, the operations of the mining itself and its results, and the safety and security of the whole things. So I mean, basically, this use case just shows a paradigmatic example of a remote location where, in order to get connectivity, the most effective solution is to use satellites. This is about, I think in this community everybody knows about the standards, and 5G with 3GPP. After effort of years, we managed to get the satellite as part of the 5G set of standards with the release 17 that was just finalized before the summer this year. And it is quite a big step change, I would think, because I mean, we have always been the last resort for communications. When nothing else was available, satellites. By the integration of satellites into the 5G and subsequent generations, the satellite is part of the network, is just one of the technologies in the network. And here is just the two illustrations of the areas in the 5G standard where the so-called non-terrestrial networks that include satellites and stratospheric platforms come into play. One is 5G New Radio, and there you have seen recently in the news that I mean, big players like SpaceX, together with T-Mobile, that I see a representative in the room, have announced a connection directly to standard handhelds. And there are other proposals being made, other developments being made of satellites that will connect to our standard devices. This is something that, of course, I mean, you need a standard and you need to work deep down on the different elements in order to achieve that. The second dimension is that of 5G IoT, with the narrowband IoT part of the 5G standard. That, of course, I mean, just the example I showed of the digital mine is just one example of what are the needs and how the needs can be covered. In ESA, we have seen that the important thing is, first of all, to raise awareness about the capabilities of the modern satellites, but also to work and to establish bridges between the mobile network operators and the satellite network operators that were living up until almost today in separate worlds. And for that, I mean, we have created, among other initiatives, something that we call the ESA 5G 6G Hub, that is basically an open laboratory where we have installed the means of connecting via satellite, using satellites in geostationary orbit, in low Earth orbit, different means, and there we are integrating equipment, we are integrating applications, and we are testing them end to end. Now moving into the future, into 6G, which is my favorite topic lately. There are, as you know, we are in the infancy of 6G. There is no clear definition of what 6G is, but there are a number of visions developed worldwide and active groups working on the R&D for that. One vision I like very much is that 6G is the network of convergences. And many people talk about the convergence between the digital and the physical worlds or spaces, and that's obviously one of the dimensions. There is another one that is the convergence, I think for the first time, of connectivity with computing. And that also has tremendous implications, I think, in terms of, you are executives, so in terms of business models and the way of working and partnering. And the third one is, I think, for the first time in history, again, is a convergence of all the telecommunication networks, fixed with fiber networks, the wireless terrestrial, and the wireless extraterrestrial or non-terrestrial with satellites. So we see that 6G is really, a paradigmatic change in the way communication networks are established. And in order to deliver on 6G, we believe that there is a fundamental need of having what some people call 3D networks, including the layer on ground that you are familiar with, or we are all familiar with, the one on the air, including UAVs, drones, including stratospheric platforms, including the space layer in the different orbits. We at ESA, both for 5G, beyond 5G, and towards 6G, have developed a roadmap of activities. As I said, we are an innovation agency. We are active in technology development. We are helping European and Canadian industrial players to develop products and solutions. We are very active in the standardization field. And also, we are active in developing pilots, trials, applications, test beds, test facilities, and doing testing of the integration of satellite into the complete 5G, 6G networks, and also towards the downstream applications and business sectors. And for that, we have mechanisms, like I mentioned, of the so-called hubs as open laboratories. We are already engaged into a number of research directions for the role of satellite in 5G. And obviously, there are keywords that are being used all over by the different groups that are active in terms of everything being optimized, being AI supported or AI based optimizations, be that at the physical layer up to the network layer and the applications. Onboard computing, this is something, a field that is relatively new in satellites. We had very limited processing power on board the satellites. But now, with the miniaturization and the increased power of processors and the use of off-the-shelf components, we are more and more moving in the direction of having processing on board so that we can participate in in this convergence of connectivity and computing. And obviously, there are things like orchestration of the network and services and the new architectures, including the cloud native things. So just to say that we are active in a number of R&D axes or directions. We have activities, and we want to increase on those, and we want to be meaningful to the community. And for that, even this last month, it was the end of September, we got already approval for an activity that is the development of a satellite, a 6G satellite. And people always raise eyebrows, and they say, if 6G is not defined, how can you launch a satellite? What we are doing, basically, is launching a laboratory that will be in orbit with key technologies that we believe will be key for the success of 6G. And there you have just a number of examples of AI-assisted everything, self-optimized networks and physical layer, going up in frequency, following again the trend of 6G that needs higher data rates and higher capacities. And something that I always insist, because I think it is the first time that in the conception of network standards or wireless network standards, we are considering security, a high-grade level of security, end-to-end from day one, and not as an add-on to the standard. And of course, I mean, there are a number of technologies associated with that, not to implement it properly. We are launching this satellite in 2024 in order to allow for an early integration and a joint optimization, what I call co-creation or some minimum co-verification of the satellite capabilities together with the terrestrial developments, so that we can achieve end-to-end orchestration, including satellites that are moving, so the base stations that basically are moving very fast. And therefore, you have to take into account that the topology of the network is changing dynamically in time. And I mentioned cloud native and so on and so forth. And why now is a question that I often get asked. Is because we are starting the phase of 6G. And our observation is that normally one generation of a wireless standard takes 10 years to fulfill. These 10 years are more or less 5 years for R&D and 5 years of standardization. So we are now starting the phase of R&D, and that's why we want at this very moment to be ready to have in 2024, so that still during the open innovation phase, a living laboratory, a living testbed, where we can test the capabilities and the integration of the satellite. And we hope that with that, and this is an invitation to this community, we hope that we will be able together to understand and to assess what can be done and not, iterate, improve, and make something that in the end, in the year 2030s, when the 6G networks are deployed, be able to be part of the ecosystem. And I believe that was my last slide, more or less in time. So I would like to thank you very much. And
Thank you there, Javier, there, from the European Space Agency for the opening keynote address there. We're very thankful for his delivery on the satellite composition in the 5G and 6G spectrum. So I just want to swiftly move this on to our next session. Feel